Everyone forgets something. Sometimes forgetting is harmless, but sometimes it changes the course of history. The post-it note exists because a scientist at 3M accidentally created a weak adhesive that was supposed to be a failure, only for someone else to realize it was perfect for leaving reminders behind. A product built around memory was born from a mistake that almost got thrown away. But forgetting doesn't always create something useful, and NASCAR is no different. From every Daytona or Talladega that has become immortal, there are dozens of racetracks that slowly disappeared from the map. Some were victims of progress, others were sacrificed for expansion. Places that once echoed with the sound of V8 engines now sit abandoned, redeveloped, or erased entirely as if NASCAR had never been there at all. Long before NASCAR became a billion-dollar sport with sold-out crowds and nationally televised audiences, these tracks were its foundation. They built the sport, only to be left behind as it continued to grow. And maybe that's the irony of success. The bigger NASCAR became, the more it outgrew the very places that made it possible. In chasing new markets, larger venues, and a national audience, it left behind some of the most important racetracks in its history. So this isn't just some dilapidated racetracks. It's a story of how a sport reinvented itself, why some of its most iconic venues disappeared, and why, decades later, fans still can't let them go. To understand NASCAR in the present, you must understand the past. In the late 1940s, stock car racing wasn't a televised spectacle, traveling from coast to coast. It came from humble beginnings in the American South, made up of a circus of mechanics, moonshiners, and daredevils. They didn't race in pristine facilities with private suites and luxury seats. They raced on the dirt fields and local speedways in small towns. And there was no place more sacred than a little spot in the brush of Wilkes County, North Carolina. North Wilkesboro Speedway wasn't just old, it was foundational. Opened in 1947 as a 5/8 mile dirt track, paved with asphalt in 1957, it hosted a race in NASCAR's inaugural strictly stock season of 1949, and North Wilkesboro would become the epitome of the small-town southern bullring. It was a unique asymmetrical beast. Because of the natural elevation of the land, the backstretch ran uphill and the front stretch ran downhill. This had the event of driving down into Turn 1 quickly and climbing up the hill in Turn 3. Why wasn't this fixed when the track was being constructed, you ask? Well, track founder Enoch Staley just built the track with his buddies when they had time away from their day jobs, and never bothered to level out the surface. And for the sake of the track's character, thank goodness he didn't. For nearly 50 years, North Wilkesboro was the beating heart of the sport. It represented small-town, rural America. Wilkesboro didn't have fancy amenities. The press box was just a wooden shack, and the garages were open-air tin roofs. But the racing was pure. It was close quarters, high friction, bumper-to-bumper theater. But by the mid-1990s, NASCAR was changing. The sport was escaping its regional identity. Corporate sponsors wanted big markets: Los Angeles, Chicago, Texas, Las Vegas, not some podunk town in North Carolina. In 1996, North Wilkesboro was bought out by Bob Baer, owner of New Hampshire Motor Speedway, and Bruton Smith, CEO of Speedway Motorsports Incorporated. Not to preserve it, but to strip it of its races. Its 2 Cup dates were transferred to the newly constructed Texas Motor Speedway and gave Baer's New Hampshire Motor Speedway a second date on the schedule. After Jeff Gordon would win the 1996 Tyson Holly Farms 400, just like that, after 47 years of continuous history, the gates were locked. The grandstands began to rot. The uphill backstretch became a meadow of weeds. For decades, it stood as a monument of NASCAR's forgotten soul, and eventually would slowly be reclaimed by Mother Nature. If North Wilkesboro was the cathedral, then Greenville Pickens Speedway was the parish church. Located in Easley, South Carolina, Greenville Pickens was a half-mile dirt track that hosted its first NASCAR race in 1951. It was paved in 1970, but it never lost its gritty blue-collar edge. This was the track where Ralph Earnhardt, Dale Earnhardt's father, cut his teeth and won the 1956 Sportsman Championship, the precursor to the O'Reilly Series today. It's where David Pearson, the Silver Fox, dominated, winning over 30 races at the track and claiming a track championship. In 1971, Greenville Pickens also made history by hosting the first ever fully televised live NASCAR race from start to finish. But as NASCAR's national division moved towards larger superspeedways and the modernization of 1972, the track would be left behind. It hosted its final Cup race in 1971, and for 50 years it remained a vital local short track, hosting weekly racing and keeping the grassroots flame alive in South Carolina. But as the 2020s rolled around, even that survival became precarious. In late 2022, the track would close down with plans to demolish the track. However, those plans have been put on hiatus, with fans doing everything that they can to fight back to prevent its destruction. And maybe one day, racing will return at the glorious track. These early speedways weren't glamorous. They were dusty, dangerous, and rough around the edges. But they were a foundation of the sport. They proved that people would pay hard-earned money to watch ordinary cars straight from the dealership push to their absolute limits. But as the upcoming years dawned, NASCAR began to dream bigger. By the late 1960s and early 70s, NASCAR was no longer a regional secret. It was becoming a national curiosity. Promoters and developers saw the massive crowds flocking towards speedways like Daytona and Talladega and asked themselves a fateful question. If we build a bigger, faster, and more expensive track, will they come? The answer, as it turned out, was a harsh lesson in the brutal economics of motorsports. Enter Ontario Motor Speedway. Built in 1970 in Ontario, California, just outside of Los Angeles, this wasn't just a racetrack. It was dubbed as the Indy of the West, as it was a replica of the famous racetrack, a massive, rectangular 2.5-mile oval with state-of-the-art 1970s luxury. The track cost an astronomical $25.5 million to build, which is over $220 million today. It had luxurious VIP suites and a massive seating capacity, far from the small rural short tracks of the South. It was designed to host IndyCar, F1, and of course, NASCAR. Ontario was a mechanical masterpiece, but financially it was an absolute catastrophe. The track was plagued by management issues, staggering debt service, and a lack of consistent year-round events to pay off its massive construction loans. It only operated for 10 years, and by 1980, the property was sold to real estate developers for its land value. Today, where what seemed to be the speedway of tomorrow once stood, there's a shopping center, an arena, and office buildings. Ontario proved that the most beautiful facility in the world couldn't survive if the math didn't work. And while that track was dying in California, a similar track was fighting for its life in the heart of Texas. Texas World Speedway was built in 1969 in College Station. It was built as a near-carbon copy of Michigan International Speedway, but with an increased banking from 18 to 22 degrees. It was designed for sheer, terrifying speed. With high banking and long straightaways, Indy cars and NASCAR stock cars could comfortably clear 200 miles an hour. NASCAR would visit the track throughout the 70s and 80s. But College Station was isolated, located far away from the major population centers of the Dallas-Fort Worth area and Houston. The facility struggled with attendance, and maintenance costs on a massive 2-mile asphalt oval were crushing, with people describing amenities to be rather lackluster and barely functional for the time. Allegedly, the people that built the facility tried to cut as many corners as they could to try and keep costs as low as possible, but ironically that made it worse. For years and years, the track changed ownership numerous times, with people in charge going bankrupt just trying to keep the place afloat. NASCAR would leave Texas World following 1981, and for decades the track would be used occasionally for amateur racing, club events, all the way up until its dying day in 2017, and would eventually be demolished, with little remnants of the track still remaining. Not all dream tracks were massive superspeedways though. Some were just weird. Trenton Speedway in New Jersey was a highly unique kidney-shaped racetrack. It featured a bizarre right-hand dogleg on the backstretch that required drivers to turn right before turning left again, basically being the road course of ovals. It hosted NASCAR races throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, serving as a vital northeast outpost for the sport. But as NASCAR shifted its focus towards standardized high-banked ovals, Trenton's odd layout and aging facilities made it a relic of a bygone era. It was demolished in 1980, but however, it still somehow lives on today. When designing the Pocono Raceway, two-time Indy 500 Roger Ward designed the track's corners based off his favorite corners from his favorite tracks, with Turn 1 being modeled off of Trenton. So every year when NASCAR makes its annual vacation to Long Pond, Pennsylvania, the drivers still have to fear a simple corner based off a track from New Jersey 160 times a year. The era of chasing bigger dreams taught NASCAR a harsh lesson. Bigger wasn't always better. The cost of maintaining these giant monuments was too high, and the crowds weren't guaranteed. But in the decades that followed, a new threat emerged. It wasn't bad management or low attendance that killed the next generation of tracks. It was pure, cold corporate greed. In the late 1980s and 1990s, NASCAR exploded into the American mainstream. The sport was no longer just for racing fans, it was a cultural phenomenon. Fortune 500 companies lined up to put their logos on cars. Television networks paid billions for broadcasting rights, and with the sport moving towards bigger markets, these tracks would be sabotaged by their owners. Nazareth Speedway in Pennsylvania was a highly unique tri-oval short track. It was fast, tricky, and produced incredible racing for both NASCAR's Busch Series and IndyCar. In 1999, the track was purchased by International Speedway Corporation, or ISC, which is effectively the track-owning arm of NASCAR. ISC didn't buy Nazareth to grow it, however. They bought it as a larger corporate chess piece. In 2004, ISC closed Nazareth, moving its race dates to other larger tracks in their artillery. For nearly 20 years, the track has sat completely abandoned, a ghost track that, just like so many tracks in this video, are slowly being reclaimed by nature, with it only being a matter of time before it is eventually wiped away. The same fate befell Memphis Motorsports Park, a fantastic, modern 3/4 of a mile short track that hosted the NASCAR Busch and Truck Series in the late 90s and 2000s. But as NASCAR sought to consolidate its footprint and focus on major metropolitan markets, the track was sold, lost its dates, and fell into financial ruin. Ironically enough, one of these racetracks that were built in a huge market wouldn't last, and that would be a 2-mile track in Fontana, California.
Your wait is over. It's big. It's fast. It's here. California Speedway. Now racing has a new home. Where will you be when a new era dawns and racing history is made? California Speedway. Racing's future starts here.
In the early 90s, iconic team owner Roger Penske built the California Speedway, now known today as the Auto Club Speedway. It would eventually be sold to NASCAR, but regardless, the track broke ground in 1995 and hosted its first race in 1997. The track was fine, but would become quite unpopular when the track would get a second date in 2004, replacing one from Darlington Raceway. And just like the track from South Carolina, it would be on Labor Day weekend, squashing the 50-plus year tradition of the Southern 500 on that weekend, not coming back there until 2015. But you know how people say you never know how much you love something until it's gone? Well, that would be the case. In 2023, NASCAR would sell a majority of the land for $500 million, with the plan to build a short track on the remaining land. But it seems at this point, it more than likely won't happen, and the rest of the land will probably get sold off. Today, what's left of the track is abandoned and dilapidated, surrounded by Amazon warehouses and data centers. However, many tracks have not been killed by their owners, but where they are located. It is every fan's worst nightmare: the booming real estate market. If you ask any older fans what the greatest road course in the sport's history was, they won't say Watkins Glen or Sonoma. Without a doubt, they will say Riverside. Riverside International Raceway, located in Riverside, California, was a masterpiece. Boasting a dangerous high-speed 9-turn layout, it was a true driver's track, hosting both F1 and NASCAR for years. It was where Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, and road course ringers like Dan Gurney put on legendary clinics of car control. The racing was spectacular.
There you see Bodine in the 5. He gets trapped on a slow car. And as he gets trapped, Earnhardt just drives around in the dirt.
Goes through the dirt.
The fans loved it and the drivers revered it. But Riverside had a fatal flaw. It wasn't the racing, and it wasn't attendance or facilities. It was located in Southern California during a massive real estate boom. By the late 1980s, the land of the track sat on was worth infinitely more as being housing developments and shopping malls than it was being a racetrack. Despite sellout crowds and incredible racing and great fanfare, the track was sold to developers. Today, the Moreno Valley Mall sits directly on top of what was once Turn 9. In this era, fans felt powerless. It seemed no matter how good the racing was or how packed the stands were, if a corporate board of directors decided the track didn't fit their quarterly growth projections, it was wiped off the map. But racing fans are a stubborn breed, and eventually they decided they had had enough. For a long time, the story of NASCAR's lost tracks was a tragedy, a one-way street of progress leaving tradition in the dust. But fortunately, there were a few tracks that have come back from the dead. One of these tracks have never truly died but has really embodied the spirit of this, and that would be in the heart of Tennessee, which sits the Nashville Fairgrounds Speedway. It is one of the oldest continuously operating racetracks in the United States, hosting races since 1904, and it hosted NASCAR until 1984. But the track wasn't truly dead, as local late model racing never stopped. But for decades, developers have tried to tear down the fairgrounds to build high-end housing and commercial spaces. But every single time, the fans, the drivers, and the local community showed up at city council meetings to fight back. They signed petitions, packed the grandstands, and made it politically impossible to demolish the track. They aren't out of the woods yet, but rumors of NASCAR coming back and upgrading the joint have been swirling around the industry. And maybe one of these years, NASCAR will stick it to the Karens and bring back NASCAR racing in the heart of Nashville. Rockingham Speedway, affectionately known as The Rock, was a brutal and challenging track in the middle of North Carolina. It was a favorite among drivers because it had an incredibly abrasive surface, and to win at Rockingham, you had to manage your tires, slide the car, and fight the wheel for 3 hours. But in 2004, as part of NASCAR's major schedule realignment, Rockingham lost its final cup date. It sat dormant for years, a heartbreaking sight for traditionalists. But the track still refused to die. Grassroots campaigns kept the track in the public eye, and it never truly got into a state of disrepair. And in 2012 and 2013, it came back to host Truck Series races. And today, thanks to state funding from tireless advocacy, and in 2025, it came back to NASCAR hosting the Trucks and O'Reilly Series. Hopefully soon, though, it can host its first cup date in over 20 years. It was truly an amazing sight to see modern NASCAR stock cars racing on the old track. However, though, there is one track that has made arguably the greatest resurrection of any track across the planet. It is a track that I mentioned at the very beginning of this video. Let us travel back a little bit to North Wilkesboro Speedway. For 25 years, North Wilkesboro sat dead. It was the poster child for NASCAR's abandonment of its roots. In the late 2000s and early 2010s, there were attempts to try and revive the speedway, but all these were just pipe dreams and eventually ran out of money. After that, the situation of the track got significantly worse. The grandstands were literally rotting with trees growing inside of them. Ironically, despite being a track known for the past, it would take a modern solution to fix it. With the rapid rise in the internet throughout the 2010s, the talk of the track grew even more, with many people on YouTube making videos about it, either discussing the history of the track or people illegally trespassing on the property to check it out.
All you kids watching right now, don't do that.
In addition, many people were clamoring for the track to be revived all across social media. But maybe the biggest effort by anyone during this time was by Dale Earnhardt Jr. In 2019, Dale Jr. led an effort to clean up the track just enough so that a group of people would be able to laser scan the track for iRacing. They wanted to make sure that even if the physical track was demolished, drivers could still race on it in the virtual world. The release of the digital track on iRacing sparked an unprecedented wave of nostalgia. It reminded everyone, fans, drivers, and NASCAR executives just how special this place was. And what happened next was nothing short of a miracle. Around this time, the world went into lockdown due to the coronavirus. And in 2021, former US President Joe Biden signed an executive order to give the states billions of dollars, and they could be dispersed by the state officials. Some of the money in North Carolina went to Marcus Smith of Speedway Motorsports Incorporated and decided to invest some of that money into North Wilkesboro, arguing that the revival of the track would help Wilkes County get back up on its feet economically. Eventually, it was announced in 2022 racing would come back to the track to incredible fanfare. And later that year, a bombshell dropped. In an announcement in Charlotte held by Marcus Smith and Dale Jr., that 27 years after it was left for dead, North Wilkesboro Speedway would come back to host the NASCAR All-Star Race. But the best part of all of this was the track that it replaced. Texas Motor Speedway, the track that was built to replace North Wilkesboro. They say that if you watch NASCAR long enough, everything will always come back full circle. And many people realized it when it was announced that a small little track in North Carolina had come back from the dead. While racing in big markets is still important, NASCAR realized that in order to go forward, they also had to look back in their past. It was amazing to watch the track get updated in real time. seeing a NASCAR classic being modernized and brought back to life as if nothing ever happened. But its history was never truly erased, as North Wilkesboro served as a time machine, a blast from the past. And when the track finally came back to NASCAR competition in 2023, it was a beautiful sight to see.
Pace car and Ray Evernham waves that green flag. We're underway, and Daniel Suarez with the jump.
And there, he clipped the inside wall, it looked like.
Wall, sure did. Easy. Barry Simpson is around.
Down.
No, into the wall goes McDowell. And Kyle Larson to victory lane in the NASCAR All-Star Race for $1 million.
Holy smoke.
Since then, the track has still had tons of fanfare. It continued to host the All-Star Race in 2024 and 2025, but when the 2026 schedule was released, it was revealed that for the first time in 30 years, North Wilkesboro Speedway would host a traditional NASCAR points race. And this weekend, 40 of the greatest drivers in the world will put on another great show for the fans in Wilkes County, truly completing the comeback of one of NASCAR's founding racetracks. The asphalt graveyard is a heavy place. It is filled with broken dreams, corporate casualties, and the literal ruins of NASCAR's past. But it is also a testament to the power of community. In the end, NASCAR doesn't fully survive off the corporate offices in Charlotte or the luxury suites in Daytona. It survives because of the people who came out to their local short tracks to see their heroes duke it out. It survives because the fans refuse to let the ghost of the tracks be forgotten. The next time you watch a race at a gleaming modern superspeedway, just remember the imperfections in the track, because they are just like those silent, abandoned ovals that built not just NASCAR, but racing across America. These tracks aren't ruins, they are a soul of the sport. And as long as we remember them, they will never truly be forgotten.